Marcus Morris going back to the Clippers. 4 years, 64. For who? Whoa, that's got to be a typo, bro. Yeah, everybody say it with me. Clippers gonna Clipper. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I have some things to say about the LA Clippers. This is a team that I was strangely invested in during the last NBA season because I thought that they legitimately were the best team in the entire league, and I predicted that they would win an NBA title. And after an offseason in which they brought in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, they followed it up in the 2020 weirdest offseason of all time by doing some things that just completely boggle my mind. So I don't need the sunglasses. I don't need the Hawaiian shirt. This is not me being brutally honest. This is me just being honest about what in the world the LA Clippers are trying to do with this roster right now. But quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, all throughout the NBA offseason. We're really close to 100K subscribers. There's a ton of content here, so if that's something you're interested in, then yeah, consider subscribing. You can also leave a like rating on the video, helps me out a ton, and you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen. But with those things said, let's go ahead and begin the video. So the night got off to a bit of a slow start in terms of free agency for me. And then things started to heat up about halfway through the night. And what really was the cherry on top in terms of like the big nugget of news for me was the fact that Montrezl Harrell signed a 2-year mid-level exception deal with the LA Lakers. This one caught me completely off guard. I honestly, I didn't even know how to react because it became pretty clear that Montrezl Harrell wasn't going to be returning to the Clippers based off of his poor performance in the postseason, based off the fact that the team simply just did not want to pay him to bring him back. And teams like Charlotte, teams like New York potentially would have been interested in Montrezl Harrell. They've got the big, cap space number. It's a guy that they actually have a chance of bringing in. And it seemed like, honestly, Charlotte was going to be the spot for him, with a relatively big money deal, right? And as it turns out, Charlotte is the team that offered the most money to Harrell, but he decided to decline that to go to the LA Lakers. Now, I don't blame the Clippers for letting Montrezl Harrell walk here. I think it became pretty clear that his value in terms of a two-way player in the postseason was not nearly as high as maybe what some people thought that it was prior to this postseason, and his value certainly plummeted. And this happens to seemingly one player a year, right? Where they get a much lower deal than we thought that they would, whether that goes back to the DeMarcus Cousins thing, going to the Warriors. Year after year, there's always a guy that goes for much less than we thought that they would. And this year, it appears as though that is Montrezl Harrell. Now, for Harrell specifically, it's a 2-year mid-level exception deal with an opt-out in the second year to go to LA. The idea here for him is that you go to LA, you have a good season, you kind of rebuild your reputation as a two-way player, you potentially win a title there, and then you opt out. And 2021 is a big free agency market with a lot of teams with cap space, and a lot of players are going to be doing that, where they're going to be signing 1-year deals or 1-and-1-year deals with a player option for the second year, and they're going to chase the big money in 2021 free agency. It was pretty clear that, there wasn't a ton of cap space out there available this offseason, and so players are going to kind of play towards that 2021 offseason. So, in terms of Harrell, he certainly could have gotten more money, but I understand the mindset. And for the Lakers, it's an incredible signing, honestly. Even as bad as Harrell looked in the postseason, and how weird it might be at times trying to figure out how him and AD are going to play together at the end of games, if they do play together at the end of games, the fact that they got Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, two guys that were at the top of the Sixth Man of the Year voting for this season, the fact that they got both those guys after coming into this offseason with pretty limited assets and cap space is a pretty incredible accomplishment. But let's get to kind of the core of the video here, right? The Clippers. So it's not just that they let Harrell go to, their in-town rivals in the Lakers, because that's at least a little bit forgivable, because again, I understand letting Harrell walk, and I don't think that in itself was a bad decision. But the fact that then it led to strengthening the Lakers certainly is not good. But this is really the reason why I made this video, is this next deal. Marcus Morris, maybe an hour and a half after the Montrezl Harrell deal was announced, it was announced that he was signing a 4-year, $64 million contract to return to the LA Clippers. And I made this joke when it happened. It's almost like the Clippers were thinking, oh, we've got an outside shot at bringing back Montrezl Harrell, or he's just going to go to Charlotte. It's not the end of the world. And as soon as they found out that he signed that contract with the Lakers, they pulled out like the doomsday contract for Marcus Morris. They're like, we can't lose both of our forwards. We've got to go bring back Marcus Morris. Go send him as much money as he wants. 4 years, 64. I can't wrap my mind around the idea that someone actually sat down, looked at what Marcus Morris did for this team last year. And yes, he shot well at times in the postseason. He made some shots off the ball, okay defender, whatever. 4 years, 64 in a free agency market in which there's like 4 teams that have that much cap space that can outright sign Marcus Morris. One of them is the Knicks that just traded them away. And the other few are younger teams that don't have anything to do with bringing in Marcus Morris right now because they don't, that's not what they're trying to do right now, unless they're the Pistons, who we'll talk about in a video later today. So I don't understand the mindset behind spending this much money on a guy. Now, if you really want to talk yourself into it, you could say, well, PG and Kawhi could leave next year. You don't really want to upset them by, not bringing back players that they think can help this roster. They gave up a pick. They gave up value. They've got to do everything they can to bring back Marcus Morris. 4 years, 64 at the end of the day isn't bad. Yes, it is. It's awful. That is such a huge, huge number considering the cap space that no teams had. If this was 2021, okay, I'd listen a little bit more. But who are they bidding against to spend this much money on Marcus Morris, I guess is my question. What is that, like $16 million a year for 4 years? There's a realistic scenario here in which by the time we roll around the next offseason, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have both left. They don't have any of their picks, and Marcus Morris is being paid $16 million for the next 3 seasons. That's a possible scenario for the LA Clippers after signing this deal, and I can't understand what they're doing here. And it's odd because before free agency started, I actually kind of like what they did with their offseason. They brought in Luke Kennard for what I thought was a relatively cheap price in Landry Shamet, and they actually got 4 second-round picks back in that deal, by the way. But this felt like a classic panic scenario by the Clippers, where they're like, oh no, we can't lose our depth. We can't lose both of our forwards. We have to go and get Marcus Morris. This is the overpay of the offseason, and I honestly don't think it's particularly close right now when you look at some of the other deals that were handed out. And again, it has everything to do with the context. I don't think that Marcus Morris is worth $16 a year to any team in any situation, but specifically with the context of this offseason where nobody was going to pay this guy that much, that's what really, really bugs me. And if I'm Doc Rivers, I'm glad that I got out. Yeah, the 3-1 collapse sucked, but I'm glad that I'm not with the Clippers anymore. This franchise just can't figure it out. I'm glad I'm in Philly, where they finally got a general manager there that knows what they're doing in Daryl Morey. They're making smart moves all up and down the roster while the Clippers continue to clipper. That's about the only way I can describe what they continue to do with this roster. And I mean, they're kind of out of chess moves. Other than bringing back some other, guys on their roster that are free agents, Jermichael Green is gone. They don't really have any moves left. They already, traded Landry Shamet, who's one of the more tradable pieces on their roster, to get Luke Kennard. Again, a move I liked. Montrezl is gone, and Marcus Morris is brought back on a 4-year, $64 million deal. And unless the Kennard deal is a huge difference maker, this team is going to be objectively worse next season unless there's a trade in the works here involving Lou Williams and some other pieces, because you're losing Montrezl, who, again, I understand why he's leaving, but the fact that he goes to the Lakers, it's such a backbreaker. And I didn't think that I would say this given the front office history of these two teams, but the Lakers they're outdoing the Clippers right now this offseason. And I understand that on the court there's been issues between those two teams in terms of the Lakers being much better and obviously winning the title, but I thought that the Clippers would have the front office advantage, and I don't necessarily believe that anymore. So I don't know what they're doing there with the Clippers with this roster. I don't really foresee a move here moving forward that moves the needle all that much for them. So I guess they're just hoping that Paul George and Kawhi are better next year, that they make more shots, they figure out the front court thing, and they go from there, because I don't think Marcus Morris is the solution. And I think you would really, really struggle to find a single person that talks a lot about basketball on a daily or on a near daily basis that sees this deal and sees this number for Marcus Morris in comparison to what Montrezl Harrell got paid and thinks, you know what, that's a good deal. I would 1,000 times out of 1,000 rather have Montrezl Harrell on that number than I would Marcus Morris, just because at least down the road, I feel like Montrezl Harrell as a younger player, not young, but younger player, has a bit more trade value than someone like Marcus Morris if something did hit the fan with Kawhi and PG, which I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe this is the move they needed to make, right? To guarantee that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are going to stay. I doubt that's the case, but maybe someone has an explanation for me. I don't have one right now. I don't understand what the Clippers are doing. I can't believe I ever put any of my faith into this team, and I'm emotionally scarred by it forever. The fact that this team was one that I thought was going to win the title, and now just continue to make bad move after bad move, and the Lakers continue to make correct move after correct move. But that's about all I have on the Clippers, and moving forward, I doubt I'll be talking about them very much either, at least not in a positive light. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.